All right, so let's get started. So just give me a quick overview on where we stand with the documentary.
Okay, well, The Thing Expanded is now well into post-production, although that doesn't mean production has finished. As of the date today, which is, God, what day is it? August the 14th. As of the date today, August the 14th, we are, I would say, two-thirds away through an assembly. The assembly is basically the rough cut of the full film. So what has formed now, anyone who's seen Aliens Expanded will know that the design of the format is to go through the film chapter by chapter and sort of elaborate and explain and expand upon the ideas of the film by chapter. So we're now up to chapter 14, although 13 still needs a lot of work. And we've done 17. So 1 through 14 and 17 shows you that I have very nearly got not a finished film by any means, but a complete story, a framework. And now, in a sense, the really hard work begins because you go back in, you start it's the bit where you start smoothing it down with sanding paper, and the kind of hopefully the statue of David starts to appear. You kind of you realize you've got a lot of repetition in quotes. You realize some bits don't make sense. When you show it to other members of the team, they kind of go, really love it, but what's that bit all about? And you realize things don't quite work. So that's the next stage. Music is being worked on, graphics are being worked on. But in a sense, we're still constructing it because I've done 2 interviews this week, which have to be inserted. There's more interviews to come. So it's a little bit of finishing and still creating. And this is the madness of making documentaries, but also the joy.
Awesome. And how long is the assembly cut at the moment?
That's a good question. Assembly cut is roughly about 3 hours at the moment. So I'm kind of, I spoke to me and my editor, Sam, we had a chat about length, and we think the assembly, and this is very rough, and it's just sort of sticking your finger in the air and checking on the wind. I think the assembly will come in roughly about 5.5 hours. And then obviously that's not the finished film. We're going to bring that down. And this is similar to the length we had with Aliens Expanded, that the initial assembly was about 5.5 hours and it was too long and it wasn't right, but we got it down to 4:17 outside of the credits. I don't know how long the Thing Expanded will ultimately be. If I was pushed right now, I'd say maybe around about 4 hours. But as I said, chapter 13 is the chapter on the spider head sequence, and I got a feeling that's going to grow and grow. No pun intended, but it's going to be keep growing, so it could well be longer. But it's certainly in the same realm as Aliens Expanded.
Awesome. And talk to me a little bit about the interviews we've done since the last quarterly update.
So we've done some it's really interesting. We've done the first set of interviews was the cast and John and the kind of key members of the crew. So Larry Franco, Stuart Cohen, Todd Ramsey. So we got the kind of those there, the originals, if you want, in the first batch. And since then, I've been sort of interviewing people on the film, not necessarily people who worked on the film, and they kind of cover a different role. So it's, Phil Nobile Jr. Of Fangoria fame, who's a fantastic mind on the world of horror, the world of film in general, but has a really quite sort of mellow, interesting way of talking about film and really knows the thing. So he's been such a joy to insert because whatever sequence you're talking about, Phil will bring knowledge to it. So you'll have Carpenter and Stuart Cohen and the actors on it. And then you have Phil just kind of contextualizing it in a really beautiful way. And they're really important interviews, those kind of on the thing interviews, because I'm not making a making of. That's part of it. That's obviously a through line, incorporated in it. But it's about the nature of the film, what the film means, the enduring qualities of the film, possible solutions and readings of the film. I kind of hasten to add possible because we're not solving the thing. All of that's really important to the expanded format. So it's people like Phil, and I've spoken to Alec Gillis this week, who's such a wonderful talker, but a brilliant brain on the world of special effects and practical effects. And one of the great subjects of I think the thing is Rob Bottin. He is a subject of the documentary, and you get such a take on not just what he was like and who he was, but what made him an artist and what made him transcend and what makes the thing transcend, and how staggeringly complex that was at the time. That Alex was talking about the fact that he really just crossed things out, in the screenplay and did his own thing, bug-like creature. No, no, no. I'm going to do something completely revolutionary. So how original the thing is something I think we almost take for granted now. But if you go back and think about it, we've never had a monster movie like that. And we've never had one since like that. So, that's really important. So you get this kind of contextual, cultural kind of atmosphere around the kind of core people who have the memories. You have this kind of other layer, and that's one of the joys of making these documentaries. Is it's a kind of layer cake kind of journey. You have your first part, and then you kind of bring in other experts, and you go back in because everyone brings new thoughts and change it. So it will be ongoing until we have to send it to you as a finished film. But that's the joy and the agony of making a documentary.
Right. And when can fans expect to see an early rough cut?
Well, the plan is to do a preview test kind of element of it. And I hasten to add that this is a very rough cut. It will not be anywhere near the finished version. We hope to do that towards the end of September. We did a similar process on Aliens Expanded, where we showed 200 selected individuals a very early version of Aliens Expanded. The music wasn't completed, graphics weren't completed, interviews weren't completed, but it was a version of the story we were telling. And this process is really interesting because essentially it's a test screening, albeit a test screening with experts, not just randomly selected people. And you're looking for, obviously, you hope people like it, even at that stage. You hope you're on the right tracks, that it's doing what people want it to do. But more than that, actually what you're looking for is people pointing out things that they don't think work and sort of saying, well, the enemy isn't disagreement. People can disagree with what we say in the documentary. The enemy is confusion. So people go, I just don't get what this is. I don't get what that is, or I don't get the point being made here. That's where I have to go. I'm not being clear, or it's I know what it is, but if the film's not explaining itself, that's a problem. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for people to go, I'm confused. I don't really, or I'm bored. There's too much of this. Or there might be things where they go, I really wish you'd done that. Or if only you put that in it, and I can sort of go back to the drawing board a bit and go, all right, let's lean more into that than perhaps we thought. And as an example, on Aliens Expanded, we had we showed it to people, and a lot of the responses were, we really wanted to know more about the Marines. We wanted Marine backstories. We wanted to know about the actors. We also wanted to know about the characters, and apart from the actors. And I really took that on board. And actually, we went back in and we did a lot more on, where the characters had come from, who they were, the backstories of the Marines. So we really do listen to this part of the process, and it sort of points you, the direction you're going in, but it points you to, a more honed, sharpened, clearer idea of what Thing Expanded should be.
Amazing. And as of this recording, what would you say is your favorite chapter so far?
Oh, it's a good question. You like chapters for different things. Obviously, there are spectacular moments in the film, chiefly the transformation sequences that everyone remembers. And they get you great stuff for the documentary, stuff that's behind the scenes, stuff that's people just infusing. There's a great quality in the Thing Expanded of people just going, I love that sequence because, I love the dog transformation. I love the blood test. But I rather like the side chapters that lead up to them. I like the chance to kind of take tangents. So we've just done a chapter that really covers a small amount of screen time, which are the discussions in the snow, when they're all outside in the kind of blizzard, and MacReady's going, well, I know I'm human, one of you is the thing. And that's led me into a whole kind of story about shooting in Alaska, shooting, well, British Columbia, Alaska border, shooting it, and the community on set and the challenges on set sort of takes you away from the film, but still the film. And I love all that stuff. But I have a real passion and I hope it's working. And I'm really kind of building towards it. Is my final chapter on the film. We've got a sort of an outro chapter, is obviously on the ending. It's the MacReady child's moment. And I've done a lot on that. And it's a very small amount of screen time for a lot of discussion. And I'm really pushing Chenmar, our composer, to work very hard on the scoring. So I want to create a mood that obviously we don't answer that. People give opinions on what's happening and who might be the thing. But it's about the haunting quality of that moment and how extraordinary that ending is. And I really want to lean into that. So I love that chapter. I'm probably going to be working on that chapter right until the bitter end, just getting it right. Some beautiful quotes on Carpenter in relation to that chapter, how it talks about him. There's some lovely stuff. Keith David is fabulous on what's going on, very funny. But I think everybody has an opinion. And so it's almost like we've got every voice on the kind of ending. So that's great.
And just a lingering question for last time for everyone asking, where's Kurt? Where's Rob Bottin? Yada, yada. What do you say?
Well, as I say, it's ongoing, and we are pushing on more interviews, and they are kind of in our sidelines. Yeah, it's complex. Kurt is part of a Hollywood process. It's dealing with agents, and if Sigourney Weaver is an example, it takes a long time. It just does. Any movie production, you'll think, you look at it, and it takes years to get this movie underway. A lot of it is simply getting the people at the right time and getting them lined up. It's an extraordinary complex process. So yes, that's ongoing. Rob Bottin is a different thing. It's, we're trying channels, we're working on things. But I think the thing I have to bear in mind, and you have to bear in mind as backers, is that he will only do it if he wants to do it. You can't make people do things. And Rob is a different, he stepped away from the limelight for very conscious reasons, for reasons that he didn't like it. And we have to accept that if he doesn't want to be on camera, that's that's an important thing we have to kind of deal with. We're not bullies, and I'm sure Rob wouldn't be bullied. So you want people to want to be in your documentary. And if he doesn't choose to be in a documentary, I don't see that as a disservice to the thing, a disservice to us. I think we have to respect his privacy, and he's very present in many other ways. That I will try until I can try no more to get him. But I think we have to recognize that, it's entirely his choice, and we have to recognize that if he chooses not to take part, then that's fine. And I think, we shouldn't blame anyone for that. It's not that we wouldn't have tried, and it's not that anyone should blame Rob for not wanting to do it.
Perfectly said. Yeah, Ian, anything else to add? Anything I forgot to touch on?
No, I think, it's, as I say, probably every time, when you start to put it together, a slightly different film emerges from the one you set out to make. I mean, Josh, you were part of the writing process, and you're very much still part of the writing. I still follow the script you delivered to me, but it's a different film to the one you wrote. It's a different film to the one I imagined, and together we can envision, and that's a good thing, because I'd say the film itself tells you what it wants to be, and the documentary tells you what it wants to be. You insert things and you do things, but then you just get these marvelous things that emerge, and you think, well, that's great. And so you do less of something and more of something else. And I really like the film that's emerging. I'm really pleased with the flow of it. I'm really pleased with how close it is to the narrative. The discussion points are much closer than they were with Aliens. They were close with Aliens. We followed scenes. But here we're following beats, and it's happening very organically. That we get to a certain point in the film, and I think, okay, I need a discussion point on this. I look in my interviews, and there it is. People have spoken about these. The example is, when Knowles comes in and from the snow, And he says, I've cut MacReady loose, and they're going, what? Or how? He goes, and he shows the bit of clothing, and clearly it's the thing setting up, framing MacReady. But then there's this lovely shot where the camera moves and the door handle. It's kind of classic horror movie stuff, where the door handle is kind of rattling. And it's MacReady trying to get back in. And it's I don't know, 20 seconds of screen time at most. And I've got a whole quote on that and a whole bit on that, just that door handle rattling and how beautiful a kind of horror moment it is. So that's the kind of thing that's been a real thrill, that the detail is there.
Awesome. I think that's the perfect way to close it out. Anything else?
No, I mean, a long way to go still. Music's being done, I'd say graphics being done, interviews still to get. But it's now kind of my favorite part, because I have a film, I can see a film, it's there it is in front of me. And, then you can go back and you start, as I say, you refine things. And, my editor has got a very high standard, and, always points out things that, he thinks doesn't flow properly. But every so often he goes, this is pretty good, isn't it? And if he's saying it, then there must be something going on in it.